Hi everybody. So today what we're going to explore is Fmod Studio. Fmod is an audio middleware software that extends the functionality of the audio that you might find in a game engine like Unity or Unreal. And so we're going to explore what some of that advanced functionality looks like. So I've gone to fmod.com and I've downloaded Fmod Studio and I put it in my applications folder and I'm going to open it up. Fmod Studio is where you build events that would go into your game. An event could be anything from level music or things like footsteps or other sound effects, stingers, musical stingers. We're going to create a new project, and the first thing that I'm going to do is just save it to my desktop. So I'll hit Command S, Command D to get to my desktop quickly, and then I'll save it as 271 Fmod practice. When I do that, it's similar to Pro Tools in that it will create a folder which will contain all the assets that are part of that project. So for instance, when I drag in a WAV file into Fmod Studio into this project, it will actually copy it directly to this folder. So it will kind of keep track of all the assets that are part of the project. So when I go over to Fmod and I see my project here, the first thing I want to do is create an event. An event is one of the objects within the game. So for instance, it could be level music. And so let's go up to the Create menu, create a new event, and we have an option between 3D and 2D. The difference between a 2D event and a 3D event is that 3D events are spatialized within the world. So if I have a 3D game and I'm a person within that world and the sound is in front of me and I turn to the left, the sound will probably pan to the right. So it's actually being spatialized based on my listener position. For underscore music, we generally don't have that unless maybe we're in front of a dance club and music is playing within the dance club and we kind of turn. But most of the time, just underscore or extra diegetic music is played in a 2D space. So that's why I created a 2D event. So I'll call it level music. And we can create other types of events here if we want. Let's say we have a footstep event that is a 3D event. Maybe we'll call it footstep. So that's a 3D event, and each one of these has its own set of tracks. In fact, if I add kind of some audio tracks to my level music, my footstep only has one track. So they're independent events with their own track structure, with their own plugins. This little unassigned tag on the right of the event means that I haven't assigned it to a bank. In order for Unity or Unreal to use this information from Fmod, we have to actually create a sound bank. We're not going to do that in this video. We're going to talk about the general differences between this and, say, Pro Tools and how this is different than Pro Tools. So the first thing I'm going to do with my level music is I'm going to go ahead and import a piece of music. This is a piece of music that I did for a Lego game, a Lego stacking game, quite a while ago. And we're going to use that as the source. By the way, when I dragged it onto a track, it copied it into the folder that I created inside the assets folder here. So I can see all the assets that are now part of my Fmod project after I drag them in. I can also see them if I go to the window menu and choose audio bin. This will show me all the assets that are part of my project, all the WAV files. Make sure it's a WAV file. WAV files are the preferred audio file for Fmod. Fmod will then do its own compression to make it smaller for the game. So it supports other types of compression within it. If I hit the play button, I should hear the audio file. Okay, so just some features that are similar between this Fmod project and a Pro Tools session. We can actually add, say, automation. If we want to automate something, we can right-click on a knob like the volume knob and add automation, that will provide a simple way to do automation. So now when I rewind and press play, my track will slowly fade in. We also can add effects to tracks. So I'm going to actually remove the automation. And if I select audio track 1, down in the lower portion of the screen, we can add pre-fader effects or post-fader effects. So I can add, for instance, a low pass filter or convolution reverb or chorus and things like that if I wanted to. So let's talk about how the timeline is different. The timeline's different because you can jump around on the timeline. So for instance, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to loop the first several bars of my piece of music. So I'm going to sort of listen and see where this falls, and I'll probably do a loop right here. So I'm going to do it right there, and what I'll first do is mark the beginning. By the way, I'm right-clicking in this black area here above the tracks, and I'm able to add loop regions, destination markers. In this case, I'm going to add a destination marker to the beginning and call it introduction. And then over here, what I'll add is, again, right-clicking, transition back to the introduction right there. So this is a transition that will actually send us back to the introduction. So very simple timeline manipulation. We don't want that. It's kind of like a repeat marker in a piece of music where we're actually repeating that section. Now, we don't want that to happen all the time. So a game would say, all right, repeat this section for a while, or repeat this stage for a while, or this loop, and then move on to something else. And so how can we set that up within Fmod? Next to the timeline, you'll see a plus button, and the plus button allows us to add a game parameter. Game parameters can be anything from distance to enemies, number of enemies, the percentage of a puzzle being completed. We can add a new parameter here, and that's what we're going to do, and we're going to call it, the parameter will be called stage, like stage 1, stage 2, stage 3, and we're going to use that. So for instance, in the game, if it's a puzzle, maybe we finish the first part of that, and we call that stage 1, and then we go on to stage 2, the next part. So we'll just call it stage, and we'll go from a number value of 1 up to a number value of 5. And we hit OK, and then we save here. That's kind of important. So next to the timeline, it's giving me a new tab here called Stage. And unlike the timeline, which extends infinitely off to the right, Stage goes from 1, which was our initial value, up to 5. And that's the end. And you can see there's also a knob up here that goes from 1 up to 5. And so we can use this parameter. A game engine like Unity or Unreal can send over the stage number to our Fmod event. So how can we then use that data in our event? So if we click on this transition back to the introduction, down below we can add a trigger condition. Remember that whatever I select up here brings up an inspector at the bottom of the screen. So if I select this transition, it gives me some properties. So I'm going to add a condition where the stage must be between 1 and 1.85, for instance, or yeah, like that. So whenever my stage parameter is within this range, it's going to loop. And when we go to stage 2, it's not going to loop. So let's look at that. If I play it here, it's going to loop now because we're on stage 1. But the game, maybe we send it, we're now in stage 2. So I'll go up to stage 2 here. It's going to not loop anymore. It's going to continue on to the next section. So let's loop this next section by adding another destination marker. Maybe we'll call this stage 2. Now the marker name doesn't really have to do with anything except as a reference point for me. And what I'm going to do is kind of loop the next section up to about 16 seconds here, where I add back a transition back to stage 2 like we did at the beginning. And so if we listen to this, stage 2 again is going to go back to stage 1. Sorry, to stage 2. All right, so that's working pretty well. But again, I want the game parameter to affect whether we loop or not. So for this, I'll select stage 2, the transition back to stage 2, and I'll add another condition, a parameter condition, which says that, well, as long as we're below 3, so I'll go up to 2.85, as long as this stage parameter is above, between 1 and 2.85, we're going to loop. And as soon as our stage gets to 3 or higher, it's not going to loop. So if we go back to the beginning, sort of see how this process works. So we're at stage 1, and remember that this introduction transition, back to the beginning, will always play based because I have the condition set to go from 1 to 1.85. So as soon as I go to 2, like so, it will not allow this to happen, and we'll move on to stage 2. My return to stage 2 marker, my transition back to that, is set up to work until we reach 2.85. So when we get to stage 3, kind of move that up like that, it's going to continue on. Okay, I'm going to do one more of these, so that we'll add one more destination marker. And you can move these up and down so it's a little easier to read. I'm sort of going back and forth. So I'm going to call this stage 3. And then a little bit later, I'm going to transition back to stage 3. Remember, this is right-clicking to bring up the different types of options here. We're right-clicking, and now we're going back to stage 3. Currently, it's set up to happen all the time. So it's just going to keep repeating that. And what I want to do now is say, all right, well, when we're going to add a condition to that transition so that when our stage marker, our stage game parameter is between 1 and 3.85, it's going to loop. And so then once we get above 3.85, then we're going to play the end. And that's it. So with your own project, I want you to loop at least 3 regions like this. You might, if you want, I think it would make more sense if I called this stage 1. And by the way, when I change that to stage 1, the transition back to stage 1 reflects the naming of that. So that's why it switched. So let's look at this all together. So what I'll do is set it up. So now I'll hit play, and my stage is 1. So when I get to stage 1, remember, this will loop or be enabled as long as my stage is set to 1. So what I'll do is now go to stage 2. The game would be sending this information in. This knob sort of is a way for me to simulate what it would be like in the game. This stage 2 transition here is set up so that it's going to loop as long as I'm under 2.85. So when I go to 3, I'm simulating what the game would be sending it. Now we go on to stage 3. And then lastly, stage 3 is set up so anything below 3.85 is going to repeat. So we'll go to stage 4 now, and then it's going to finish up. For your own projects, I want you to create at least 3 of these transitions with 3 markers, and it can either be your own piece of music or it can be from your composers. One last thing, when you're done, you can quit out of Fmod Studio, save your project and quit out, And then you'll need to zip up your project using compress, like so. So now my project is compressed, and this is what you'll send to the assignment. You'll submit this to OL. All right, let me know if you have any questions.